show the rainbow, or is that not allowed?
Unfortunately,
Okay.
no. We have to have the rights for that
Yeah, all right.
photo. But
Okay.
you know what? If you'd like to just show it to the camera really quickly, I can't bring it up myself. But
Right.
if you want to show me a picture of your phone, yeah,
that
a
was
little more to
there.
that way.
Got it?
There it
See
is.
Yeah.
Maybe a little bit more to your left. There we go. That's a little better.
So anyway, so this was
With the UK umbrella,
with
that's
the
really
UK
powerful.
umbrella. So, but there's plenty others. But I thought since it was NBC, we could show it. But you know what? Maybe my phone just turned itself around.
There you go.
I didn't post anything.
Making sure that we're showing what we're allowed to be showing, folks, because on social media, there's going to be so much that comes out, and just making sure that we're following the rules here on WFLA Now. Lee Spann, JB here with you live, and live in our stream center as we continue to monitor the aftermath of this massive historical news. Queen Elizabeth II passing away at the age of 96. So let's break down the expectations, Lee, if we can, for the minutes and hours ahead. We keep showing this podium shot. Has there been anything regarding a schedule as to when we're going to have this massive televised moment to all of the UK and all the world?
That I have not seen. According to protocol, is that we should hear from King Charles today. I don't know that there is a protocol for hearing from the Prime Minister, which is outside of 10 Downing Street, what we're looking at here. So I'm sure at any, that a Prime Minister would make a statement. It does not necessarily need to be in the protocol. It's just, now Liz Truss is the head of the government there in Great Britain and in I guess in England at this point. And so I'm sure we will hear from her. It does not necessarily have to be in the official protocol for that, but in the official protocol, we are to hear live televised broadcast from now King Charles. That's happening today. He will officially be proclaimed the king tomorrow. There's a set number of days between her death and her funeral, and that is 10 days. So during days 3 to 4, you'll see King Charles go throughout the UK, visiting the Scottish Parliament, Hillsborough Castle, St. Anne's Cathedral, and on day 5, a procession will begin, starting at Buckingham Palace and ending at the Houses of Parliament, and that's where the Queen will lie in state for 3 days as members of the public will visit to see her coffin. Then 6 to 9 days, King Charles will visit the Welsh Parliament, and the government at this point will be putting the final touches on the plans for the day of funeral. They are expecting hundreds of thousands of mourners to flock to the streets during the 9th day, and the funeral being held on the 10th day. They said employers are not obligated to give staff a day off, though it will be a day of national mourning, and a 2-minute moment of silence will be held across Britain. And the funeral will take place at Westminster Abbey, followed by a committal service at St. George Chapel, Windsor Castle, where the Queen Elizabeth will be buried at King George IV Memorial Chapel, which is, I guess, her dad's namesake there.
Again, live here. Also outside of Balmoral Castle, beyond these gates are where Queen Elizabeth II has passed away at Balmoral. And again, we don't know whether or not the royal family made it in time to be there. I'm sure that some members of the royal family were there at her side, but whether or not others who were rushed in that royal convoy made it, it's unclear. But if we hear anything, we'll pass it along here to you live on WFLA Now. This not only establishes Charles as king, but we now have a new heir to the throne as well. And it comes in the form of the Duke of Cambridge. It comes in the form of William, who, of course, you don't need me to talk to you about who William is, who the Duke of Cambridge is, as we see some of the vehicles get through here to Balmoral Castle. But, of course, everybody moves up now in the line of succession, and Charles will be coronated as king and take over as the head of state for the royal family. And this is just the next 10 days are going to be history for the United Kingdom, and of course all the people that are citizens of our neighbors to the east, as far as our UK neighbors. I'm just thinking about how much this is a moment in time where, of course, we're transitioning from one reign over to the next.
And I keep playing in my head. Earlier today, there was a picture of, the beautiful princess and Kate and William and their 3 children as they walked Prince George to his first day of school. Prince George, who is now one up closer to the heir to the throne, and what his first day of school must have been like today. He went from 4th to 3rd in line while he was in school. And I don't know if maybe they were able to go get him from school, but that's one of the reasons why Kate is not in Scotland, is because they are imagining that she's picking him up from school, doing the things that a mom does.
We'll continue to monitor your Facebook Live and YouTube Live comments. Please keep things kind, considerate, and respectful as we monitor your comments. If you use #HJB or #HeyLee, we can animate your comments on screen like this. We had Kayla up. Let me just acknowledge Kayla really quickly. #HJB, prayers to the family. Hope the family gets the privacy that they need. They are a family that has, of course, their vulnerabilities as well. They're a family on the grandest stage at their royalty, but they are a family, and they are, of course, deserving of the same privacy that any family should get when we're talking about the loss of a loved one. And Ange, #HJB, this is such a sad day. However, we are a part of a major historical event. It is. It's the end of one reign and on to the next. And also, as some folks that were just chiming in on YouTube, saying hello to the YouTube live comment section, a lot of titles change now.
Yes.
We're talking about Duke of Cambridge going on to become the Prince of Wales.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And so a lot of shuffling that goes around. This is a major reorganization of the royal family, and a lot of moving parts. And this is something that I am by no means, and I will make this very clear to our audience, I'm no expert, but I'm looking forward to being humbled by watching this all unfold over the next 10 days and watching how a royal family transitions from one generation to the other. Unless you are somebody who is 80
in your
or
80s,
90, 80
yeah.
in your 80s or your 90s, you can't recall the last time that there has been a major transition of power from one head of state to another within the royal family of the United Kingdom. So we're all going to be witnesses to this, and I'm looking forward to, as sad of a day as this is for Queen Elizabeth II, this is a moment in history, and we are going to be witnesses to watching this all unfold now over the next 10 days. And we'll do our very best to live stream as much of it as possible, because it will be fascinating. It will be fascinating.
Yep. As many people will say, God save the king, the queen. Now we have to say, God save the king.
God save the king. God save the king. Getting to some other Facebook Live comments. Again, you can use #HeyJB or #HeyLee. This is a big question that continues to come through. Who was actually there? Who was able to say their final words to the Queen before she passed at Balmoral Castle? Barbara wants to know if Harry made it before her passing. We don't even know if Harry has made it to the property. That's still something. I've been looking for updates on Harry and his travel, and we know that he was in Europe. We don't know if he made it over to Balmoral Castle in time.
Because they gave us updates for everyone throughout the day. Okay, now this person has left here. They're on a flight to Scotland. So the fact that we haven't heard that
the Prime Minister is speaking now. Let's transition over. This is Prime Minister Truss. Let's listen in.
Her life of service stretched beyond most of our living memories. In return, she was loved and admired by the people in the United Kingdom and all around the world. She has been a personal inspiration to me and to many Britons. Her devotion to duty is an example to us all. Earlier this week, at 96, she remained determined to carry out her duties as she appointed me as her 15th Prime Minister. Throughout her life, she's visited more than 100 countries, and she has touched the lives of millions around the world. In the difficult days ahead, we will come together with our friends across the United Kingdom, the Commonwealth, and the world to celebrate her extraordinary lifetime of service. It is a day of great loss, but Queen Elizabeth II leaves a great legacy. Today, the crown passes, as it has done for more than 1,000 years, to our new monarch, our new head of state, His Majesty, King Charles III. With the King's family, we mourn the loss of his mother, and as we mourn, we must come together as a people to support him, to help him bear the awesome responsibility that he now carries for us all. We offer him our loyalty and devotion, just as his mother devoted so much to so many for so long. And with the passing of the second Elizabethan age, we usher in a new era in the magnificent history of our great country, exactly as Her Majesty would have wished, by saying the words, "God save the King."
Prime Minister Liz Truss with a prepared statement ending, as we were just talking about, Lee, with the first time in more than 7 decades, we will be saying God save the King instead of God save the Queen. A touching tribute to Queen Elizabeth II. And again, another moment in history as we stay here with you live, folks, on WFLA Now.
We are
As we-
here.
Yep, and we'll stay here with you for a little bit longer as we continue to make sure that you have a voice in the Facebook Live and YouTube Live comment section. There is a crowd here outside of Balmoral Castle. For those of you still just getting acclimated to what we're looking at, we were live with Buckingham Palace at the beginning of the live stream, showing you the crowd that was developing and growing larger outside of Buckingham Palace, but the Queen not there. Queen at Balmoral Castle, where she passed away earlier today. The exact time, the exact cause of her death, those will come out in time. We're not at that stage just yet. However, a lot of activity outside of Balmoral Castle, including the arrival of the royal convoy earlier that we had on YouTube Live. And now we're seeing a lot of cars, of course, come and go from the castle itself as the family is in a state of mourning. We have a King Charles III in the UK, who is now mourning the loss of his mother, but assuming, as they put it, an awesome role, an awesome amount of power as being the head of state in the UK for the royal family.
And we continue to use the weather as such an analogy for how we all feel. It rained all morning. It was pouring. Then the sun came out. It was a rainbow. And now there are more raindrops and more tears as more people are finding out the news of the death of Queen Elizabeth II.
We'll continue to, over the next, we'll stay with you live for a little bit longer on WFLA Now, on Facebook Live and YouTube Live across all of our platforms, including WFLA.com, the WFLA app. I love this comment from Florian. I think that there are a lot of people who, so here in the United States, and I can speak, of course, for the United States, I've never lived in the UK. I've never visited the UK. I hope to visit the UK one day. I know you do. You do as well, yeah. Lee. I don't know. I can't speak to what it is like today for the people of the United Kingdom, the people of England, the people of Scotland, the people who are just experiencing something that they haven't experienced really in their lifetimes, as we've been noting, unless you're considerably older. I can't speak to what it is like for them. I can speak that there are folks here in the United States that are so very much, let's just call them fans of the royal family, and who follow all the developments that happen with the royal family, whether it's William or Harry or Kate or Meghan Markle. Of course, when Meghan Markle was a major news story years ago with Harry, just there are some people who are just completely locked into everything related to the royal family. And I can't speak for, I'm not one of those people. I'm being very coy and honest with you. But some people are. And some people feel this incredible kinship with the royal family and feel this incredible sense of connection to the royal family. and want to know everything that is going on within the royal family at all times. I love this comment from Florian. I'm going to put it up here on our screen. Hashtag KJB. She was like everyone's grandmother, the most respected queen in the world. Her death shocked everybody. One of the saddest days of 2022. Rest in peace, Queen Elizabeth II. But this is a comment that just sums up how connected some people feel to the royal family and how connected some people feel, Lee, to Queen Elizabeth II.
I have always said that Queen Elizabeth looks just like my grandmother. They look identical. And so you're right. She is everyone's grandmother. Yeah. I don't know if it's the hair that, the way they coif their hair from, in that time. The walk. She was, I have always said, she looks like my grandmother. So you're right. She is everybody's grandmother, because good times, bad times, family quarrel times, your grandma is always right there. And that's what she was for her family. But it's also what she was for many people around the world.
Got this comment that's coming in. Thank you, Florian. That's a beautiful comment. And we have another one from Erica. Hashtag KJB. The queen is now in her heaven with him, with her forever king. Hashtag London Bridge has fallen. Yeah, we've been talking quite a bit about London Bridge as well.
As the code name for the protocols that would happen after her death, because it would be that London Bridge has fallen.
Yeah, and this is and to Darcy and other commenters, Lee was just commenting on this a short time ago, going over Operation London Bridge. I read an article called London Bridge, says Darcy. It explains everything that happens from her death in the next 10 days. This is going to be protocol that establishes the next reign. And so again, I was talking about how humbled I feel, and how I'm sure humbled everybody feels to be witnesses to what is going to transpire over the next 10 days, because this is something that is generational and with the most famous family in the world.
Yes.
I mean, really is.
And, and one of the things that the Prime Minister Truss said, which you forget because you think, okay, it goes back to, the royals go back a couple of generations, but you forget it's been thousands of years that that this Windsor family has, had a line of succession that has happened. So while for us, it's been 70 years, I mean, this is part of antiquity that's been going on for so long. And of course, the world has changed a lot in those years, even in the 70 years, as we've talked about. And so certainly changed over thousands of years that this family has reigned over parts of the world.
Also, too, with the wrinkle of, the last time we were talking about this, the last time that they had to do a transition of power like this, they didn't have to worry about Twitter.
No.
They didn't have to worry about Facebook or social media.
You had to print a newspaper.
That's right. It was all in newspapers. So this is a completely new task, even for representatives of the royal family who are going to help facilitate these next 10 days, these crucial next 10 days from the transition of Queen Elizabeth II to King Charles III. And we're going to have coverage for you folks on WFLA.com, the WFLA app, as well as, hey, look, our live stream is getting put out to a lot of our Nexstar sister station websites, social media platforms, and apps. Wherever you're watching from, good afternoon to you. You can follow Lee. You can follow myself on social media. We'll post updates as we get them. There's so many questions that still remain. We do not know the cause of death for Queen Elizabeth II. It is likely related to natural causes, but if there was anything else that played a part in her final moments or the decline of her health, we will find that out. And of course, from the BBC and from the royal family, and that will get put out on our various social media platforms. Believe me, we know that this information is going to be all over the place, but we are going to be putting it out on our pages as well. And there's a link in the description on this video. If you're joining us on YouTube Live, on Facebook Live, you'll see a link in the comment section that will take you over to the corresponding Nexstar station website, where we'll have all of our coverage for you. All the storylines that are going to now unfold, Lee, over these next 10 days. This is a moment in time where there's going to be developments every hour for the next 10 days. New wrinkles that are going to emerge, new exciting developments, announcements from as we transition from one chapter of the English monarchy to another. And as those questions get answered, we'll make sure that we have coverage for you on whatever website, app or social media platform that you're watching on. Just click on the link in the description on this video. Lee, any final thoughts before we wrap up our live stream here?
Well, at some point today, the protocol calls for now King Charles to give a televised speech. Perhaps he will give more information. Perhaps he will give a tribute to his mother, and then this will then start the 10 days that will take us through the funeral, including 3 days that she will lie in state. And they are expecting hundreds of thousands of people to turn out to London, to turn out for the procession that will take her through the streets to her lying in state position, and then through the funeral, and then, of course, to her final resting place. So a lot of people will want to be here. A lot of people just got to celebrate her in her Platinum Jubilee. And I have no doubt there will be people right back out to celebrate now the end of her life.
We'll just end out here on some of the we call this file footage, archive footage that we have from the UK and
looks like my
of
grandmother.
Queen Elizabeth II. And we'll let this play out for just one final moment before we conclude our live stream, just to show you a little bit of Elizabeth II. Of course, in better health and better spirits in years past. That smile is iconic. There's no doubt about it.
Those
It reminds me
pearls.
of everyone's grandma's smile, and the pearls. Yes, the dress. She exuberated grace, and it's a sad day, but also a celebration, truly, of her life. As things now develop in the days ahead, we will continue to provide you with streaming coverage of all of these major historical moments with the transition from the reign of Queen Elizabeth II to King Charles III. You can click on the link in the description on this video. It will take you over to WFLA.com or one of our Nexstar sister station websites or apps where you can read the very latest and get follow-up articles about Queen Elizabeth II, King Charles III, and everything connected to the royal family. And of course, Lee and I will continue to post things on our social media platforms in relation to the passing at the age of 96 of Queen Elizabeth II. Thanks so much for joining us on WFLA Now, and additional live streams coming up in the hours and days ahead here on WFLA.com, the WFLA app, YouTube Live, Facebook Live as well.
it's remarkable. People aren't, you don't hear the chatter, shouting, you don't hear kind of the throng of a crowd. There's just a silence across this area, apart from the occasional sound of a car horn. Even the cars themselves, I think, are driving more slowly, and people are being more careful. Clearly, cars are having to be more careful because there are crowds of people here now. I suspect there will be more. And it's just a picture of people, and not just British people, but people from around the world, because, of course, this is a part of London where many folks come when they visit London. Many people watching will know this place because they'll have been here. And it's just a picture of people coming to pay their respects.
All right, Keir, we'll be coming back to you. In the meantime, let's go to NBC News historian Michael Beschloss. Michael, why does this loss feel that it extends far beyond the UK?
You said it, as usual, exactly right, Lester. You know, we've talked a lot about how much Queen Elizabeth brought to British history and to the last 7 decades of what's happened in England, but the same thing is true for the world and certainly for the United States. We've gone through a very turbulent time the last 10 years or so, and one of the fixed points in our world has been Queen Elizabeth with that fund of experience that goes all the way back to the 1930s, the Great Depression, World War II. She met Eleanor Roosevelt, she met Harry Truman, and most of all, each of those presidents who have met with Queen Elizabeth, even when she was a princess, she was in a position to say, well, you know, this problem in the Cold War reminds me of something that Eleanor Roosevelt told me. Or this problem in the economy of the 1990s reminds me of something that Winston Churchill told me after World War II. That's what we've lost.
All right, Michael, thank you. We'll be coming back to you. Let me bring in NBC News British historian Andrew Roberts. Andrew, great to have you here with us. Can you give me your thoughts about the new king, King Charles, and how much he is or isn't like his late mother?
Yes, he is like his late mother in that a lot of his beliefs are the same. He is someone who believes in the what's the best way of putting it? The sort of evolution of nature. He's very much an environmentalist, of course, which she was as well. He believes in the fundamental goodness of people, which she did, and he's somebody who has a strong Christian faith, like she had as well. So you have certain things like that. He's committed to duty, which is very important, needless to say, in a monarch, and she personified that, really. Whether or not he, I mean, the very fact that he's 73 and coming to this role, of course, means he's not going to just for sheer longevity's sake, not going to be in it for as long as she was. But nonetheless, he has been practicing now for this job for 70 years and will be ready to pick it up. So he's going to be able to hit the ground running, as it were. How will he deal with, a family that large and that public? How will he deal with the occasional moments of turmoil or relationship difficulties? Will that be like his mother? Well, he's already had to, of course, with the problems between his two sons, with everything surrounding the death of his first wife, the terrible issues regarding his brother, the Duke of York. This is not a family, as we all know, the way in which it's produced as a sort of soap opera. It's not a family that isn't used to crises, but there is an inner calmness to Prince Charles that I think we're going to see a lot of, and which we need, frankly, because that's also one of the great attributes of his mother. All right. Thank you for your thoughts. We'll come back to you a little bit later. Let me go right now and talk about the love story that was the Queen, the passing of her husband, Prince Philip, only a year ago in April. Let's pause for a moment, take a look back at their 73-year-old story. Here's Kelly Kobiea.
A queen and her prince, side by side for 7 decades, through a lifetime of royal celebrations and scandals, weddings and funerals.
He has quite simply been my strength and stay all these years.
Their early story was a real-life fairy tale. Elizabeth, still a princess, first saw Philip, a handsome naval officer, when she was just 13.
Princess Elizabeth saw this 18-year-old, 6-foot-tall, incredibly handsome. He was nicknamed the Viking, and she fell desperately head over heels in love with him at first sight.
The schoolgirl crush blossomed into an old-fashioned romance. World War II kept them apart, but they managed to stay in touch by mail.
He was fighting on pretty much all the naval fronts. It was a correspondence love affair, really. They wrote letters to one another.
In July 1947, Philip asked for the future Queen's hand in marriage. Just 4 months later, a historic wedding at Westminster Abbey, a celebration for a country still recovering from the trauma of war. Princess Elizabeth became a naval officer's wife, living quietly in Malta, starting a family. That all changed when her father, King George V, died, and the young Princess Elizabeth became queen. At the coronation, Prince Philip swore his allegiance, saying he would be her liege man of life and limb, giving up his brilliant naval career to serve his queen.
It wasn't a division of labour that was traditional to somebody of Philip's upbringing. He was always quite the alpha male, so having to take a step back and follow his wife as she became head of state was a big adjustment for him.
While the Queen looked after her nation, her people, and the Commonwealth, Philip was the patriarch, looking after the family, a devoted father and husband, admitting in a rare public moment it wasn't always easy.
Tolerance is the one essential ingredient of any happy marriage. It may not be quite so important when things are going well, but it is absolutely vital when things get difficult. And you can take it from me that the Queen has the quality of tolerance and abundance.
They were married for an incredible 73 years, united until Philip's death in April of 2021. The Queen, private in her grief, leaving a handwritten note on his casket. And as she had throughout her life, devoting herself to duty, keeping calm and carrying on. And just months after Philip's death, honoring his life's work.
As the impact of the environment on human progress was a subject close to the heart of my dear late husband, if we fail to cope with this challenge, all the other problems will pale into insignificance.
Queen Elizabeth will be buried with Prince Philip in Windsor Castle's King George VI Memorial Chapel, the two side by side again.
And you saw Daisy McAndrew, a royal expert for NBC News, in that story. Daisy, good to have you back. There is a picture that I think has lingered in a lot of our minds at the funeral of Prince Philip, of the Queen by herself. It was a time of COVID, really a lonely figure. What are your thoughts when you think of that moment?
I think you're right, Lester, to say she cut a lonely figure, but I think she also cut a very brave figure. She wanted, in some ways, just as she did when she was a little girl in the war, to show that whatever her people were going through, she would go through as well, that it wouldn't be one rule for her and another for the rest of us. So I think it felt very important to her to show that she was abiding by those very difficult, painful COVID restrictions. And as I was just saying, just like in the war, the fact that her family didn't move out of London, the fact that Buckingham Palace was bombed, we saw pictures of her and her sister and her parents in the rubble of Buckingham Palace. It was the same message. I'm in this with you. During COVID, she became so much of a leader. I mean, she's always been a leader, but she was making public statements to her people, to her subjects, saying, in the first one, we will meet again. And it was very reassuring to know that the Queen was going through what the rest of us were going through. But as that lovely film showed, this was a true love story. And I don't think it's a coincidence that the Queen's health failed just less than 18 months after she lost her beloved Philip, because they really were very, very in love. he always made her laugh. They had the same sense of humor. She was perhaps a little more quiet and shy than he was, but he would jolly her up and always making fun. They had a sense of humor. They loved it when things went wrong. I don't mean that in a cruel way, but they both went, obviously they spent so much of their time going to official engagements, opening new hospitals or schools or factories or whatever it might be. The Queen, people often said about the Queen that she must think that she must have thought that everywhere she went smelt of new paint because everywhere would be newly decorated before she got there. But of course, sometimes things went wrong. And the Queen and Prince Philip were really well known for laughing about the fact that things went wrong, to put people at their ease, not to make people feel awkward. Because they often said in private, it made it more fun when something went wrong, or, a dog started barking or something fell over or whatever it might be. She was also very much more modern than a lot of people gave her credit for. And that was something that she shared with Prince Philip as well. They both loved technology. They were early adopters, if I can use that modern phrase. They were very into photography. When 3D came out, she did one of her Queen's speeches using 3D technology and watched it with great delight with 3D glasses. She loved anything new and modern. She wanted the country to be modern, not to be old-fashioned.
All right, Daisy, I want to go to the White House again and bring back Kristen Welker. I understand we're hearing something from the president now.
We are getting our first statement from President Biden. This is a written statement, Lester. Let me just read you part of it. It is quite extensive. President Biden saying, quote, that Her Majesty the Queen Elizabeth II was more than a monarch. She defined an era. In a world of constant change, she was a steadying presence and a source of comfort and pride for generations of Britons, including many who have never known their country without her. In enduring admiration for Queen Elizabeth, united people across the Commonwealth, the 7 decades of her history-making reign bore witness to an age of unprecedented human advancement and the forward march of human dignity. So President Biden there really stressing her impact worldwide. And of course, as we said, he met her just a year ago and then again back in 1982 when he was a senator. And he writes about that, Lester. He writes, "We first met the Queen in 1982 traveling to the UK as part of a Senate delegation, and we were honored that she extended her hospitality to us in June of 2021 during our first overseas trip as President and First Lady, where she charmed us with her wit, moved us with her kindness and generosity, shared with us her wisdom. All told, she met 14 American presidents. She helped Americans commemorate both the anniversary of the founding of Jamestown and the bicentennial of our independence. And she stood in solidarity with the United States during our darkest days after 9/11, when she poignantly reminded us that grief is the price we pay for love." And the president ends his statement, Lester, by saying, "In the years ahead, we look forward to continuing a close friendship with the King and the Queen Consort. Today, the thoughts and prayers of the people all across the United States are with the people of the United Kingdom and the Commonwealth in their grief. We send our deepest condolences to the royal family, who are not only mourning their queen, but their dear mother, grandmother, and great-grandmother. Her legacy will loom large in the pages of British history and in the story of our world." Lester, we're hearing from other former presidents as well. Former President Trump writing, "Melania and I are deeply saddened to learn of the loss of Her Majesty the Queen," calling her historic and remarkable. Former President Obama also saying that Her Majesty captivated the world. So again, I think these statements underscore that very special relationship that these American presidents had not only with the Queen, but with the UK, and the impact of her loss on this day, not only here in Washington, but all across the country, Lester.
All right, Kristen, thank you for that update statement from the president. Let me bring back Wilfred Frost. And Wilfred, one of the things we've talked about is how the Queen was scaling back on events due to health. But in the end, she worked to the last.
She absolutely did, and that commitment to her sense of duty to the very end was remarkable. I was thinking, as you were discussing there with Daisy, the passing of her late husband, given that we knew her health was already deteriorating, many people thought, wondered whether her health would deteriorate faster after the passing of her husband. Then earlier this summer, as we approached that milestone of her Jubilee, many wondered whether, again, she would start to lose her commitment to duty after she delivered that wonderful celebration for the nation earlier this summer. And then another milestone was put in front of her earlier in July, when her 14th Prime Minister was forced to resign, and she ensured she was there until the very end to make sure the smooth handing over of power and appointment of a new head of government took place under her careful watch just 2 days ago. And indeed, the new Prime Minister, Liz Truss, mentioned that in her speech earlier this evening, saying that the Queen was determined until the end to carry out her duty. A remarkable commitment to her duty throughout life, and also pretty astonishing, Lester, to think that this nation has now seen a change of government and a change of head of state within the space of just 48 hours.
Yeah, Wilfred, we'll come back to you. Thank you. Let me go back to Molly Hunter, our correspondent in London right now. You know, we have, even before the death of the Queen, we have looked at family unity as an issue within this greater royal family. Does that now come under a sharper microscope?
Lester, absolutely. It has been in the headlines for the last couple of years so heavily. And the Queen, while playing this unifying, central, constant role for her country, also played that for her family, also played that for her grandsons, for her children, and stood by her family. She didn't ever really publicly get involved, play politics kind of in the weeds as some of her children, as some of her grandchildren were really battling it out on the public relations stage, but she is known internally as kind of bringing everyone together, and we saw that today. All of her children made their way to Balmoral today. Everyone wanted to be with her, and you saw in the car Prince William was driving, Lester, with 3 of his uncles, all traveled together, which is fairly rare to see that many members of the royal family together, not only on the same plane, but in the same car, traveling, with a small convoy. We also know Prince Harry was traveling up. We know that he was traveling separately, Lester, from Prince William, but in coordination, according to his sources, to people close to him, in coordination with the rest of the family. We know that rift between the brothers, between her grandsons, has been front and center for the last couple of years. And it was something that Queen Elizabeth tried to foster, tried to nurture. She wanted her grandsons to get along. She kept her relationship with both very strong. And as Prince Andrew weathered scandals in the press, and of course legal troubles as well, she stood by her children. She stood by her son. So she played this role in the family, Lester. Whether or not Charles can step into that role, into those shoes, I think remains to be seen. His public mission, his public ambition is very clear. He has big shoes to fill. He has a big role. He has to galvanize the country right now together. Whether or not he will also be able to play that unifying grandparent role, fatherly role in his own family among his siblings, I think will be very, very interesting to see.
Okay, Molly, thank you. NBC senior international correspondent Keir Simmons remains outside Buckingham Palace. And Keir, perhaps you could pick up a little more on William and Harry. What do we know about that relationship and the potential awkwardness of this moment of family grieving?
Yeah, Lester, it really does strike me that William has made it to Balmoral. Harry was on his way. We're not sure if he's there yet. But remember that Balmoral was the place where they were consoled by the Queen after the death of Diana. So there will be so much in this meeting between them when they are there together at Balmoral for the death of their grandmother. And just remember that moment when they walked behind Diana's coffin and the grieving out on the streets of London over the death of their mother. I think that this will be a very difficult moment for both of them because we know how incredibly close both of them were to the Queen. She was there for them. She was with them when at their darkest moment when they lost their mom. And of course, what we all know now is that she was trying to do that while dealing with the public demanding, calling for her to come back to London because the public were grieving too. And it just sums up, doesn't it, the extraordinary tightrope that it is to be a monarch, to be a queen or a king. And King Charles now faces this kind of challenge. The extraordinary tightrope you have to walk between the personal and the private. But again, just think about Prince William, who just took his children to a new school. Kate back here with the children. Prince Harry, Meghan staying behind. The two of them, just the two of them, together there at Balmoral, and all of the meaning that will have for them. And I talked about the crowds out on the streets at Leicester, and I really want to just step out the way and give you a picture of what's happening behind me here, because it is, it is a moment. It is pretty extraordinary, actually. I'm not over there with them, obviously, so I can't give you the full picture, but every now and then we hear kind of a round of applause ripple through the crowd, sometimes cheers or shouts. At the same time, when that isn't happening, it is very, very quiet here, somber. And I don't know if you can see, but it looks to me as if, I don't quite know whether people are doing this to take pictures, but it does look to me as if people are holding up mobile phones, kind of as, the modern day flame, if you like. People are just trying to do anything they can here to pay their respects, to have their voice heard in amongst all the voices that will all be saying just how much the Queen meant to them. And I don't know, I think they may have closed the road. We've been wondering whether they would just have to just close the road. This very famous, this is, anyone watching who's been to London will know exactly where we are. This is the world famous Mall. This is where the Jubilee celebrations happened. That's the famous balcony, Buckingham Palace balcony, where we saw the Queen celebrating her 70 years on the throne just a few months ago. It's really quite hard to comprehend, isn't it? I know that we've all known that this was coming, but to comprehend that it was just a few months ago that we saw her there on the balcony with crowds like this cheering her. Great memories, because when you lose someone, one aspect, isn't it, is to look back on all the good times, and that really, really was a good time.
All right, Keir, let me go to Molly Hunter, who's got some news regarding King Charles. Molly?
Lester, that's right. We know that King Charles III is going to make a statement tomorrow. We have very few details about what exactly we expect him to say, when exactly he's going to do it, but it has just come in that he will speak to the nation tomorrow, Lester.
All right, Molly, thanks. Keir, if I can go back to you, for an audience, largely an American audience, how would you explain the tightrope of politics versus public service for members of the royal family, especially as we watch King Charles III begin his reign?
Yeah, King Charles has a huge weight on his shoulders, doesn't he? Imagine trying to follow in the footsteps of Queen Elizabeth II, an extraordinary monarch, somebody who didn't always get it right. I mentioned the death of Diana and all that was going on behind the scenes, and then, of course, the public uprising, really, that there was at that time, because people wanted change in the monarchy, and it took a little while for the Queen, at the urging of the then Prime Minister, Tony Blair, to understand what was going on with the public and to make that shift. But shift she did, move she did. The flag that is now at half staff, now at half staff above Buckingham Palace, I'm pretty sure that's a Union Jack flag. The flags did not fly at half-mast over Buckingham Palace. The only flag that flew there before the death of Diana was the Sovereign's flag, until the public demanded that for Diana a flag flew at half-staff, and now a flag is above Buckingham Palace at half-staff for the death of the Queen. So she was prepared to change, but at the same time valued tradition. How can you not when you come from a family that have been the monarchy of Great Britain for 1,000 years? So she had, that's the kind of tightrope she had to walk, and at the same time that very, very difficult balancing act of your private life and your public life. And right now, you asked me earlier whether we will hear from the members of the family. Right now, I think, and I hope honestly, that they are really having some private moments to think about her, the person that she was for them. So yeah, for Prince Charles, a huge challenge to take on, despite the fact that for decades he has known this was coming and has been thinking about what it would mean. I think he will have plans. I suspect that he will have plans to slim down the monarchy. I think he will think that the public after Queen Elizabeth II will want a slimmed down monarchy. But for now, though, you can only imagine what he must be thinking.
Yeah, we'll be hearing from the King, as we learned a few moments ago, sometime tomorrow. On that note, let me bring in NBC News British historian Andrew Roberts back. This is obviously, as Keir was noting, he's got a lot on his shoulders. This is going to be an important speech. What do you think the British public will be listening for in his remarks?
I think they'll want him to be personal. There's a slight sense, of course, with the royal family that they have to be pretty formal. But we remember the time when he called her mummy in the Jubilee. And it'd be lovely to have something like that again, something that really reminded us that these people, yes, they're royals, but they're also human. And that aspect of things is something that I think, if I were advising him today, I would concentrate on that to get over, because all of the rest of kingship, it's very formal, very dignified, and we'd like to see what he really feels, I suppose.
King Charles III is the official title he takes on. As he goes about, shaping the monarchy in whatever fashion he wants to do, does he have someone he relies on? For example, did he often rely on his mother, or did he have other counsel?
Well, also his wife, of course, the Duchess of Cornwall, who is a tremendous, now the Queen consort, of course, a tremendous advisor to him in his life, and so he will be listening to her excellent advice as well. And
he will lead not only as head of state, but lead a family that sometimes can have its dysfunctional moments, as many families do, but most families not, certainly in the public kind of way that we've seen.
Well, wouldn't it be great, though, if they use this opportunity to come together? They're going to be, Harry and William they are together at the moment up at Balmoral with their father. This would be the absolute ideal time to do what the Queen herself obviously desperately wanted, which is for them to patch up their differences and to make up and to end this split, which is obvious and slightly undignified and certainly very bad for the royal family. And if they could do that, then I think it would be very, very good for all concerned. Obviously, things might have gone too far, but it's a perfect opportunity.
The death of the Queen, as we had noted in some of the earlier conversations, brings about a period for a lot of people. They don't know a world without Queen Elizabeth. Will this get people to reevaluate the importance of a monarchy?
I think that as we have about 85% or so of people who, in the polls, who support the concept of this constitutional limited monarchy, which has no de facto powers but great vestigial prerogative powers. Frankly, we've made up our minds about this. It's not one we're going to change regarding who happens to be wearing the crown at the time. It's a very popular system here.
And what do you think life will be like in the coming weeks during this period of mourning leading up to the funeral?
Well, I think what we're going to see are vast lines of people that are going to spread all the way down the River Thames, all the way to the business district of the City of London. It'll cross a couple of the bridges. I think it will be number in its hundreds of thousands. I think that they won't care what the weather's like. They will get in that line in order to file past the catafalque, the coffin of the Queen as it lies in state at Westminster Abbey, and then Westminster Hall, and then we will really see how much the Queen has touched the lives not only of Britons, but people are actually already been hearing about people coming from all over the Commonwealth to walk past the coffin. So I think that will be an extraordinary phenomenon.
Andrew, what do you think was her finest moment, at least in public life?
Gosh, there were so many. There really were. I mean, one has to remember she's the last reigning monarch who actually served in the Second World War. She was a member of the ATS in the Second World War, and that in itself is quite something. The moment that she was up on the balcony waving to the crowds on VE Day when after Germany had surrendered in the Second World War alongside her parents and Winston Churchill. I mean, that was obviously a fantastic moment. I think that phrase that President Biden mentioned after 9/11 when she said that grief is the price we pay for love, that it still gets me in the throat, that statement. She was a very, very pro-American monarch. She loved America. Whenever she had a chance to go on holiday, which was only 3 times in her life, i.e. a holiday where she was not holidaying as the Queen, she went to America each time, to Kentucky. So I think that the way in which, through soft power, she's managed to make our country a major minor one on the world stage is something that we're going to thank her for very greatly.
Yes, we are entering a period, certainly a period of mourning in the UK, but a reflection on a life well lived. 96 years old. Let's pause for a moment to give an update to those just joining us. Queen Elizabeth II, Britain's longest serving monarch, has died at the age of 96. Buckingham Palace posting a statement that reads in part, "The Queen died peacefully at Balmoral this afternoon." Her family rushed to be at the Queen's side at Balmoral earlier today after doctors publicly stated that they had become concerned for her health. The Queen reigned for 7 decades through periods of peace and crisis. And now, for the first time in 70 years, the UK has a new monarch. King Charles III, who was chosen to go by that name, the third, the Queen's son, stepping into his new role the moment she passed away. He issued a statement that reads in part, "The death of my beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen, is a moment of the greatest sadness for me and all members of my family." Let's take a moment now to look back at the Queen's remarkable legacy.
Queen Elizabeth II, Great Britain's longest-serving monarch, died after living a life dedicated to duty. Born in 1926, the third grandchild of King George V, Elizabeth would guide the nation and its monarchy through historic challenges. During the Blitz, the royal family stayed in London, despite the nightly bombing raids from Nazi Germany. To the people of Britain, there was this message from their future queen.
We know, every one of us, that in the end all will be well. For God will care for us and give us victory and peace.
That speech sealed a special relationship with her future subjects. Westminster Abbey, 1953, the first time TV cameras were allowed inside to record a coronation. The celebration was seen worldwide. And Elizabeth's reign would be felt worldwide. She was the most widely travelled monarch in history. She helped transform Britain's empire, easing former colonies into states, and all that while balancing motherhood and monarchy, 3 sons and a daughter. The pomp was there, but circumstances changed. For the first time, the Queen opened the royal family to the public eye. She encouraged her children to live lives beyond the palace walls. In some ways, the royal family appeared just like the rest of us, vulnerable, There was divorce and reconciliation. Her son, Prince Andrew, mired in accusations of sexual misconduct. But the tragedy of Princess Diana was an especially dark moment for the royal family. Her fairy tale romance and marriage ended in scandal with a messy divorce and then death. Diana killed in a traffic accident in Paris. The royal family grieved privately, but there was growing anger in Britain that the monarchy was out of touch, detached and aloof. The Queen quickly returned to London from her vacation home to pay tribute to Diana and face a challenge to modernise the monarchy.
I, for one, believe there are lessons to be drawn from her life and from the extraordinary and moving reaction to her death.
Queen Elizabeth set out to change the face of monarchy. It would be more open, compassionate, in touch with a changing British public.
Institutions, which in turn must continue to evolve if they are to provide effective beacons of trust and unity.
She embraced many changes, including the marriage of her grandson Prince William to commoner Kate Middleton, and Prince Harry to the American actress Meghan Markle. She celebrated the birth of great-grandchildren, including Prince George, third in line to the throne. In 2021, her beloved husband of 7 decades, Prince Philip, died. In her words, he was her strength and stay. But Queen Elizabeth continued to inspire people around the world. During the COVID pandemic, her words helped everyone to keep calm and carry on.
This time we join with all nations across the globe in a common endeavour, using the great advances of science and our instinctive compassion to heal. We will succeed, and that success will belong to every one of us.
She was the longest reigning British monarch in history on the throne for more than 70 years. Her Platinum Jubilee celebrated with a military parade. Beacons lit across the world.
I keep mine in here.
A surprise appearance from Paddington Bear. And over 10 million people across Britain gathering for street parties to honour their one and only Queen. The Jubilee concluded with a final wave from Queen Elizabeth from the balcony of Buckingham Palace. She was joined by 3 future kings, Prince Charles, Prince William and Prince George. The crowds cheering for Queen Elizabeth II, a monarch for the ages. Keir Simmons, NBC News.
And Keir joining us now from outside Buckingham Palace in London. And Keir, we spoke shortly after the news broke, and I think you expressed perhaps what a lot of people were feeling, that they were surprised at their reaction to this news, knowing the inevitability, knowing her frail health, her age.
My beloved mother, Her Majesty the Queen. Yeah, Lester, you know it's coming, but it's just hard to comprehend all the same, isn't it? It's like, as I've said a number of times in this broadcast, it's hard to comprehend that we were standing here and she was standing on that balcony of Buckingham Palace. And it's hard too to just take in the breadth of her life, as I was saying in that report there. She was born just a short distance from here in a very smart part of London in a private house, because royals and members of the aristocracy, that's what they did. They didn't go to the hospital to give birth. She was educated in Buckingham Palace behind me there. She wasn't sent to school, because you weren't sent to school if you were a royal in those days. You certainly didn't go to university, and she didn't. She was born in the 1920s in the era of the wireless radio. There were no computers, there were no cell phones, and yet, and I'm just going to step out of the way so you can just see this, and I know it's dark so it's hard to see, but the lights that you can see amongst that crowd are the lights of cell phones being held up by the crowd, and now a little bit hidden by the umbrellas, which in that classic, I mean, it's completely completely British, isn't it? That people are having to stand there with umbrellas because there was a light drizzle of rain right now. But, as I was saying, the lights you can see are the lights of cell phones. Something that she would never have imagined. Her family would never have imagined when she was born in the 1920s. So what an extraordinary life, what an extraordinary era she has lived through. The Elizabethan era, the modern Elizabethan era, which has now come to an end. And I think she wasn't just a constitutional figure. She's become a cultural figure in the modern world. Incredible. In that report, you saw her enjoying some of the features of modernity, of television and things. Remember that moment, Lester, at the Olympics when she agreed to do that spoof James Bond and pretend that she jumped from a plane? I mean, just think about how kind of impressive it is that a woman who was born in that age was able to stay so traditional and steadfast and at the same time prepared to become the person that she became.
Keir, thank you. We'll continue to come back to you as our coverage continues this afternoon. Right now, let me bring back Wilfred Frost. Wilfred, she had 70 years to make the crown her own, to define, what the head of the monarchy looks like. Will King Charles III also perhaps go his own way and redefine it in another way?
Well, of course, that remains to be seen, but I think he can take a great lesson from his late mother in the way that she led her life and reformed the monarchy when it needed to be. And there were moments where she let that need for reform get ahead of her. The late 90s, as Keir has already mentioned, was perhaps an example. But in the final couple of decades, she has really clearly moved it with the times so that it's in a place where there's never demands for change. And I think he will, as we've heard already, with perhaps decisions to slimline it more, will try and move ahead of the curve on that need for reform. But I think above all else, the key thing she did so well that he will try and emulate is deliver on her duty and do so with the grace that she did it, never seeking glory, only looking to serve her people. And there's a sort of quiet nature with which she did it that I think so endeared her to the people of this nation and around the world and gained her that respect and admiration, Lester.
We spend so much time talking about her in a more modern era of the last, several decades, but we forget even, being a royal, some of the things she did, working on trucks, for example, around the war. She was a very different kind of monarch.
She absolutely was, and working on trucks during the war is clearly a great example of that, loving the countryside, and despite being a monarch, despite being a queen who was born in an age where that meant just profound amounts, she connected with individual people. And just think how times have changed over 70 years. The world and Britain is much more of a meritocracy today, as it should be. It respects the establishment much less than it used to, and yet the Queen's approval ratings, and because of it, the monarchy's approval ratings, are higher than it's ever been. That cannot happen without her having delivered quite so remarkably as she did. It's a huge task to follow her, of course, now for King Charles III. But I think he has already taken great lessons. And we've already got a glimpse of his commitment to duty, Lester, because he will leave the warmth of Balmoral, which he loves, and his family, where they are mourning together tonight, as soon as tomorrow, to travel to London and deliver a speech to the nation. Already you're getting a glimpse there of that commitment to duty that we saw from his late great mother right until the end.
Yeah, really important points there. Let me go to NBC News Chief White House correspondent Kristen Welker. Kristen, we know there's a statement now from the president, but other former presidents and other leaders now are weighing in on this news.
That's absolutely right. And first, just to set the scene here, Lester, House Speaker Nancy Pelosi has ordered the flags at the U.S. Capitol be lowered to half staff. We did get our first public reaction from President Biden, who said that Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth was more than a monarch. She defined an era. He goes on to say, in a world of constant change, she was a steadying presence and a source of comfort and pride for generations of Britons, including many who have never known their country without her. The president calling her an enduring admiration for Queen Elizabeth united people across the Commonwealth. The 7 decades of her history-making reign bore witness to an age of unprecedented human advancement and the forward march of human dignity. And as you say, Lester, we are hearing from former presidents as well who met her. Former President Donald Trump saying, Melania and I are deeply saddened to learn of the loss of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. He met with her in 2018 and 2019. The former president going on to say she will always be remembered for her faithfulness to her country and her unwavering devotion to her fellow countrymen and women. Former President Obama and Mrs. Obama also releasing a statement. They were just here at the White House yesterday for the unveiling of their portraits. The former president saying, Michelle and I were lucky enough to come to know Her Majesty, and she meant a great deal to us. Back when we were just beginning to navigate life as President and First Lady, she welcomed us to the world stage and with open arms, with extraordinary generosity. Time and time again, we were struck by her warmth, the way she put people at ease, and how she brought her considerable humor and charm to moments of great pomp and circumstance. The Obamas meeting with her as well several times. And then former President George W. Bush writing, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II was loved and admired by President and Mrs. Bush. She set the standard for steady and dedicated service, performing her duty without fail throughout a historic period for the UK and the world. President Clinton saying we will always be grateful for the kindness she showed us through the years, particularly during our visits to Buckingham Palace in 1995 and 2000, and for all she did to deepen this special relationship. And then the statement from the Carters as well, saying that her dignity, graciousness, and sense of duty have been an inspiration, and we join the millions around the world in mourning a remarkable leader. And I think that really underscores the point, Lester, that people are mourning all across the country here and really all around the world. And these extraordinary visits that she had with the present president and former presidents, 14 in all, if you count a meeting that she had with former President Hoover at the time, just really underscored the special relationship between the U.S., between the UK. There were so many notable moments, Lester, that evolved throughout the years, throughout those visits. One being when she rode horses with former President Reagan. She loved horses, and so that produced this extraordinary, iconic image of the two of them. And then just an anecdote that I will share. During her last visit to the United States, she was being hosted here at the White House for an official dinner by the Bushes back in 2007, a white tie event, Lester. The fact that it was white tie was rare. And former President Bush was delivering a speech. He started talking about an historic event, and he started to confuse the date of that event. And the Queen apparently gave him a look, the former president saying, it's a look that only a mother could give. And she really had these incredibly personal moments with these U.S. presidents, really strengthening the bond between the two nations. Lester.
Yeah, I recall that story. Kristen, thank you for sharing. Let me bring in NBC News historian Michael Beschloss. Michael, our country famously defied a monarch, and yet this monarch for 70 years has had a really profound impact here and elsewhere. Why?
Well, one thing I think we've got to really focus on, and we'll learn probably more about Lester in the next few weeks and months and years, is that this was really an amazing woman. This was not just someone who was a great diplomat and knew not to laugh at the wrong time or not to give someone the side eye if they were doing something wrong. You know, think of it this way. She was born in the 1920s. Her father was the brother of the Prince of Wales. She was never expected to become queen. She was not really high up in the line of succession. Suddenly, the king abdicates in 1937. Suddenly, she is going to be the heir to the new king. And the result is that she then becomes queen in her 20s in 1952, a time when most people are pretty unformed. And look what a different world it was. You know, we were talking, Kristen was mentioning the fact that she met with President Kennedy in 1961. Well, when Kennedy went to Buckingham Palace, the British government said, "Is there anyone you'd like to have at the banquet with the Queen?" And Kennedy's aide said, "Yes, we'd like Jackie Kennedy's sister Lee, who lives in the house in London, very close to Buckingham Palace." And the palace replied, "We can't have Jackie's sister because she's divorced. The Queen does not entertain divorced people at dinner at Buckingham Palace." That was only 1961. Look at how different that was from the world of 2022. Yet, Queen Elizabeth II managed to remain central and relevant.
Oh, Michael, I'm sorry, you still with us?
Yes.
Oh, okay. I did want to ask you about King Charles III, and whether you think he will want to reach out to the administration here or other foreign governments quickly.
I am sure he will reach out to the American government quickly, something that Winston Churchill always said. I'm sure you know this one, Lester. He always advised other prime ministers of Great Britain, never get too far away from the Americans. Make sure that that relationship is always close, even if you disagree.
And the White House has not said one way or the other whether the president would be traveling for the funeral. Historically speaking, would it be likely that he would?
I would be surprised if he did not, given the length of this relationship, the importance of our relationship with the UK. And it's rare that something like that doesn't happen, and sometimes has ramifications. For instance, when Franklin Roosevelt died in April of 1945, long before you and me, Roosevelt was faded in Washington. There was a funeral at the White House. He was buried at Hyde Park, New York. And Winston Churchill, his great friend and ally of World War II, did not come, largely because the British thought that it was still too dangerous for the prime minister to sail across the Atlantic before there was peace with Nazi Germany. And oddly enough, for years, there were people in both England and the United States that felt that that cast a little bit of a pall over relationships. So diplomacy does have some importance.
All right, Michael, thank you. Let me bring in again NBC News British historian Andrew Roberts. Andrew, thank you for sticking with us here. Can you shed a little light on the relationship between the Queen and the United States, how she felt about this country?
Yes, she loved America. As I think I mentioned, she only had 3 holidays in her life where she was not queen, as in she was not visiting as a head of state. And in all 3 of them, she went to visit Kentucky. And her, in a sense, personal belief in the special relationship was something that was inculcated with her during the Second World War, especially the way in which she got on with people like Dwight Eisenhower. And she also made a special effort with all the American ambassadors to the Court of St. James. So yes, she was somebody who loved America. And I think that...
Yeah, I was going to say the monarchy, of course, is steeped in tradition. Did she enjoy those traditions? And I think back to only a few days ago, officially appointing a new prime minister. Did those sort of things, were they important to her that they follow a strict tradition?
Absolutely. Well, that is her job, to appoint prime ministers. It's an absolutely central, key constitutional point, is that it's her who appoints the prime minister, and that keeps the politicians under control extremely well. They can sometimes become hubristic and somewhat sort of power hungry, and it's a good thing for them to be reminded that there's somebody above them in the pecking order. It's worked extremely well for us over the years.
Yeah, and does the Queen and now the King offer advice in terms of state policy?
That's right. Well, we don't know exactly what is said in the meetings because the Queen has never said, and the Prime Minister certainly never say. She is constitutionally expected to, the phrases, advise, encourage, and warn, and we believe that she has done all of those three things to her prime ministers at different stages. But the fact is, we just can't be certain.
All right, Andrew, thank you for that. We want to show you a picture just from a moment ago. The flag, the American flag at the White House is now at half staff, and to honor Queen Elizabeth, who died today at 96. Let me bring in Wendy Noggle. She's the editor-in-chief for People magazine. Wendy, we've been looking through this through the eyes of America, her relationship with America, and the importance of a figure like the Queen to many Americans. Can you enlighten us on that, why this connection is so strong?
I think the connection is so strong. Obviously, this is a key ally for us, but also there are so few female leaders that we've seen over this tenure of time, and she has been our strength and stay. She's told us how to keep calm and carry on. You know, she has seen so much of history and been a part of history and been a real leader that people can aspire to in terms of everything that she has weathered with such a calm demeanor and her incredible sense of duty. You know, the Queen is someone that it was never an option to quietly quit. She worked right up until the very end, and her sense of duty was unparalleled. And I think that is such a touchstone for everyone across the globe.
Yeah, I think I wonder sometimes if some of the struggles, some of the personal family struggles they had, that people, you know, could in some ways identify if that made her somehow more accessible or someone more to admire.
Yes, I think that's exactly true. We could all relate to the tensions and issues that bubbled up in the family, and we could see how that played out in our own families, and it made her incredibly relatable. And also in her later years, we really saw her as a grandmother and a great-grandmother. You know, as she was steering the monarchy into a more modern age, we also saw that play out in her relationships with her children, grandchildren, and great-grandchildren.
All right, let me go back to Daisy McAndrew, a royal expert for NBC News. Daisy, as we enter this period of mourning right now, our friend Keir Simmons acknowledged that a lot of folks don't know how to react. They saw this coming, they knew it was likely going to happen soon, but are surprised by their reactions. Do you think we're going to see a lot of that, a sense of surprise of people feeling the way they feel?
I really do think that. And as you quite rightly said, logically thinking about this, of course, we all knew it was a case of when, not if, and that when was probably going to be sooner rather than later. But I think in a weird way, this still will rock the country, because when you're used to something always being there, and in this case, that something being the Queen, and she's not there the next day, I think there really will be shock and reverberations. And it might take a while, but I suspect that when her body is brought back to London and is laid in state in Westminster Hall in the Houses of Parliament, I think the numbers of people that will come to show their respects will be huge. And that might come as some surprise. I think people will be reflecting that she was always a symbol for us, but what she symbolized over the last 70 years has changed hugely. Of course, when she first became the Queen, the monarch, the monarch was held, you know, as almost as being sent from God. There was a religious element to it, and people would bow and scrape towards the monarch, but thinking that, you know, this was almost, you know, a holy symbol. Of course, that symbolism has changed a lot, and nowadays people think of her as a symbol of stability and service and hard work, as a reflection, as many politicians and so on have been saying today, you know, of the best of us, as the Prime Minister said, the rock on which the nation was built. So that stability is going to be shaken now, and people are going to be thinking about the future. What is the future of the country? Where is our place in the world? What's going to happen to the Commonwealth? Something that the Queen was so passionate about, keeping the Commonwealth together. What will Prince Charles, now King Charles, be like? Will he be a leader? Will he be strong as she was? And also, it's been very notable over the last few months that King Charles, as he is now, has shown quite a lot of emotion. How much emotion will we see in the next few days? He will now be facing his official accession in a ceremony tomorrow. Tomorrow at midday, I think church bells around the country, muffled bells, will be ringing out. There will be lots of moments of reflection over the last few days. And of course, none of us, unless we're in our mid-90s, as the Queen was, can remember the last state funeral of a monarch and the last passing from one generation to the next. So it is going to be a strange period of reflection and a bit of navel-gazing about who we are.
Yeah, and you mentioned King Charles III. As we watch this process, we watch him speak tomorrow, take the reins of the monarchy, we have to remember that he's not just a member of the royal family. He is also the son of the late Queen, and so he will be viewed, I guess, through a lens of a grieving son as well.
Exactly that. And if you think of his predecessors, it was not the done thing for them to show emotion at this time, because this time was, a moment of great constitutional significance. I mean, going back hundreds of years, it was a time when one monarch passed on to the next, where you might be expected to have some sort of turmoil from foreign invaders. So it was always a time when the new monarch would have to show that he or she was strong enough to defend the nation. Of course, the monarch now has a different role, and it's more about reflecting modern Britain. It's about showing that they can understand us and ask us to understand them. So he will have that slight difficulty of trying to work out how much emotion to show us, how much to let us into his personal grief, or whether his role is actually to be strong on behalf of us. And of course, he might come to some sort of criticism of he's being too stoic, he's being too stiff upper lip. We want to see some warmth and some emotion. So all of those things will have to be very carefully thought through.
All right, Daisy, thank you. We continue to watch the pictures here of people who've made their way to Buckingham Palace, who are slowly making their way by in a procession, people leaving flowers here. I don't know if this is Buckingham we're looking at. This Windsor Castle. People leaving remembrances in honor of their late Queen. Let me bring in NBC's Molly Hunter. Molly, we know that world leaders are weighing in right now, and we're hearing from the Vatican, I understand.
We are. We just got a statement from Pope Francis. It's actually addressed to His Majesty the King, Charles III. He writes, "Deeply saddened to learn of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. I offer heartfelt condolences to Your Majesty, the members of the royal family, the people of the United Kingdom, and the Commonwealth." It's a long statement. He continues to say, "I willingly join all who mourn her loss in praying for the late Queen's eternal rest and in paying tribute to her life of unstinting service to the good of the nation and the Commonwealth, her example of devotion to duty, her steadfast witness of faith in Jesus Christ, and her firm hope in His promises." He then goes on to say, "Upon you and all who cherish the memory of your late mother," and he's addressing Charles not as a king here, as a son, of course, who's lost his mother, "I invoke an abundance of divine blessings as a pledge of comfort and strength in the Lord." Now, Lester, we're also hearing from world leaders from every corner of the globe. I'll just share a couple with you. We've heard from President Zelensky, President of Ukraine, of course. He tweets, "It is with deep sadness that we learned of the death of Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. On behalf of the people, we extend sincere condolences to the royal family, the entire United Kingdom, and the Commonwealth over this irreparable loss. Our thoughts and prayers are with you." We've heard, the UK's very close ally, France, of course. Emmanuel Macron, the President of France, he tweets, "Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth embodied the British nation's continuity and unity for over 70 years. I remember her as a friend of France, a kind-hearted queen who has left a lasting impression on her country and her century." We also know, Lester, the Eiffel Tower will go dark tonight in honor of Queen Elizabeth. The mayor of Paris has released that. And then just one more statement. Of course, a Commonwealth leader, Justin Trudeau, the Prime Minister of Canada, has said, "It is with the heaviest of hearts that we learned of the passing of Canada's longest reigning sovereign, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II. She was a constant presence in our lives, and her service to Canadians Guardians will forever remain an important part of our country's history. Lester, we are seeing these heartfelt condolences. Many of these leaders, of course, met with the Queen over her reign. We know that Pope Francis met with Queen Elizabeth in Rome in 2014. So these are people who had spent time with her, who knew her. They aren't just sending condolences to a family that they had no kind of personal interaction with. I think a lot of leaders, even young ones like Justin Trudeau, of course, felt a tremendous, not just loyalty, but tremendous fondness for the Queen, of course. We also heard, as Kristen Welker mentioned earlier, we've heard from President Biden, we've heard from former U.S. presidents as well, but I think these kinds of condolences, of course, these kinds of statements will be rolling in all night, Lester.
Yeah, it's, as you've been speaking, we've been rolling this montage of her with various world leaders, and it goes on and on and on. Molly, thank you. Let me bring back Wilfred Frost. Wilfred, I was curious what was going through your mind as we were watching citizens bring flowers and lay them there against the fence at Windsor Castle.
Well, absolutely, Lester. We've seen so many of these images, whether it's at Windsor or outside Buckingham Palace behind Keir and all across the country. And I think what we're witnessing as those members of the public are grieving and leaving flowers is her common touch, is the way that she managed to connect with people. We know that from the many examples of when she was at public engagements and people would speak afterwards about how she engaged with them. But all of these people laying flowers have not met her, and yet they still feel that connection to her. And I'm drawn, Lester, to a line, the opening line in the statement that's been emailed to me by Tony Blair that says, we've lost not just our monarch, but the matriarch of our nation. She was this motherly figure that everybody, whether they'd ever come across her in person or not, was able to feel a connection with. Tony Blair, of course, was one of her longest-serving prime ministers for 10 years of her 15 prime ministers. And I think there's another aspect to this, not just the connection that everybody feels to her, but a sense of gratitude as well, because everyone feels she delivered for the nation. And I'm just so happy that she was able to witness that gratitude at her Jubilee earlier this summer. Of all those moments when we wanted to see her on the balcony, perhaps more important was the chance she had to see her people waving, smiling, and celebrating and saying thank you to her earlier this summer. And I think that's a similar sentiment that's now being witnessed in a different way as they lay flowers and grieve her, but at the same time thank her.
Yeah, how do you frame this moment? Like all countries, England, the United Kingdom went through the COVID crisis, the depth of the COVID crisis, now going through a financial crisis. There has been a political change of leadership, and now the death of a queen. That's a lot.
Oh, it's an awful lot, and I think the thing to strike, actually, most importantly here, Lester, is this crisis that you mentioned, the economic crisis or the war in Ukraine as well. That's down to the head of government, and I think it's important that she was here to make sure there was a smooth handover of the head of government. That power now rests in Liz Truss's hands. Extraordinary weight on her shoulders. A terrible inbox just 2 days ago that has now gotten even tougher to deal with 2 days into her premiership. But that was important, that she was here for that handover of power, that it went as smoothly as it did. Though what we now lack as a nation, what we now miss, is our head of state and that unifying factor that she provided to help us get through the challenges. And that aspect of it now falls, of course, on King Charles III. It remains to be seen the scale with which he can step up to the mark, and it'll be interesting. But I think we've already got a glimpse of his commitment to that duty, as we said earlier, that he'll be down in London tomorrow and indeed deliver remarks as king. But an extraordinary 48 hours, Lester. You cannot overstate that we've witnessed the change of government and now the change of head of state as well.
Yeah, you could argue this is an early and an unforeseen test for a new prime minister. She spoke to the nation tonight. What are your thoughts about her message?
I thought it was remarkable, in fact. And do you know what? In the course of the leadership contest over the last 6 weeks, Lester, many have criticised the quality of her public speaking. Some would say that she came across as slightly robotic, and I think she stepped up to the mark incredibly well. She was brief, to the point, and prime ministerial, as she needed to be, and spoke of the fact that the Queen reigned with dignity and grace for 70 years, that she was the rock on which modern Britain was built. And I think the most striking part of her speech were the final couple of lines where she reflected on the fact that earlier this week the Queen was determined to carry out her duties when she appointed me as Prime Minister. She reminded the nation of perhaps the most important part of the Queen's reign, her commitment to duty, and linked it back to herself. So I think at a very early stage of her leadership, a massive test thrown at her feet, and she stepped up to the mark. The bigger tests are to come, both relating to this issue and issues of government, and we will see her tested. But I think Keir was absolutely right to make that comparison to the way in which very early in Tony Blair's leadership, he had to step up to the mark and capture the mood of a nation as we reflected on the loss of Princess Diana, and this an even bigger challenge for today's Prime Minister, just 2 days into her premiership.
Yeah, just remarkable. Wilfred, thank you. Also with us again, NBC's Molly Hunter. Molly, you're going to look at her loss in through a different kind of a lens that we don't often talk about.
That's right. In more of a celebratory lens, which I know feels hard, I think, at this moment, perhaps, to think about. This country is absolutely in mourning, still in shock, even, as I think Wilf had said before. But we did take a look, Lester, at the Queen as kind of the most recognizable face, the most recognizable woman in the world. Take a quick look.
The Queen's image was recognizable around the world. A pop cultural icon.
The Queen has been depicted in popular culture more than any other person, really, because she is a global icon. She is immediately recognizable anywhere and everywhere in the world, and because she's been around for such a long time.
At a glance, Queen Elizabeth was known for her handbags, her pearls, her eye-catching bright colors. Some say her outfits reflected her belief that she had to be seen to be believed. Artists took inspiration from her likeness, and while shows and movies about the royals took off,
I don't often get into a fight, but when I do, I want to win.
The Queen herself wasn't necessarily a loyal fan.
We know that some members of the royal family watched The Crown and other dramatizations of the monarchy. There's never been any suggestion that the Queen herself watched it. You know, if you're born into the royal family, hundreds of thousands of pages of script and drama will be written about you, whether you like it or not.
And to those who knew her best, she had a very different side, less formal perhaps than the reserved leader we all saw.
I always wonder whether anyone properly captured her sense of humour.
There is a knife into my foot.
I know there is. She exceeds the throne when she's just 25, and over the course of subsequent decades, not only proves herself to be one of the world's most experienced ambassadors, but equally probably one of Britain's most stalwart, if the most stalwart public servant that's ever lived.
England's longest-serving monarch, her dedication to service defined the royal family, adored at home and admired by fans around the world. Molly Hunter, NBC News, London.
Yeah, Molly, we had heard earlier that she was a fan of technology and an early adopter of her time, and that story certainly reminding us of her contributions to pop culture in many ways.
Absolutely. Her contributions, whether willingly or unwillingly, consciously or unconsciously, I think that is why we are seeing, the statements from around the world. That is why we are seeing Paris, turn off the lights on the Eiffel Tower, why we are seeing the crowds right now push themselves up against the fences at Buckingham Palace, because everyone felt like they knew her, Lester. People feel like the Queen belongs to them because she was in all of these films because she was in The Crown. And even though she wasn't necessarily a fan of The Crown, we all watched The Crown and felt like we had learned about her life through this, fictional, although based on real events. We watched movies about her at all stages of the last 70 years. And what I like about this, in that piece, we mentioned her sense of humor that we didn't necessarily see publicly. We saw this stoic, stalwart, a very stable leader. But apparently, according to those who knew her best and were closest to her, she did have a sense of humor. And we saw her, Lester, in 2012 when the Olympics were here. We saw her alongside Daniel Craig's James Bond character, which was quite fun. We saw her just now in the Platinum Jubilee. We saw her acting alongside Paddington Bear. So she certainly had that kind of light touch when she wanted to. She certainly just picked and chose her moments. But as everyone has said, she has written about fiction and nonfiction. She is in so many movies, so many TV shows, and so many of us around the world, fell in love with the Queen because of this, because of these fictionalized dramatizations of her life, Lester.
Yeah, Molly, thank you. Let's bring in NBC News British historian Andrew Roberts again. And Andrew, if we can pick up on what some of Molly was saying, for a lot of people in the UK tonight, do they feel that they've lost part of their national identity? When you think about how people, outside your country think of Great Britain, they think about the living landmarks that are the British royal family.
They do. Of course, they do feel that, despite the fact that this lady was 96. It still comes as a bit of a shock that she wasn't immortal in a way. But also, they do recognise that this story, this long story, this 1,000-year-long story of the British monarchy is a series of chapters, and one chapter has closed today, but other chapters will open, and we can look forward to the reigns of King Charles III, of course, and then King William V, and then King George VII. And that's quite a thing. That will take us through to the whole of the rest of this century, to the end of the 21st century, and we can see the way that that's going to progress. So there is a cloud over us, but there is one with a silver lining, and that is the continuity of the institution.
We have some pictures, apparently we've received now, of Prince Harry arriving at Balmoral this evening without Meghan Markle, we should note. Andrew, is he in a, we have all watched the strain in that relationship between the brothers, between over the decision to leave the UK. Is that going to be under a lot of the microscope now as we watch this family move through a private grieving process in a public way?
I'm afraid it will be, yes. It's the inevitable fact that there is a story there, undoubtedly, but also I'm afraid it's a story that the media loves, that they will do everything in their power to poke their nose into, and perhaps even to stoke up, frankly. And so I'm afraid that we're going to see, just as we did a bit with Prince Philip's funeral, that this great state occasion is going to be slightly muscled into by people who are watching the body language of these two brothers.
I'm looking at a dizzying chart of the family and the family line here. Some of the titles are going to be changing. Will some of the duties and the roles, will others be called upon to step up in places they haven't been before within the family?
Yes. Well, obviously, at the beginning, the first thing that happens is that the Prince William will at some stage become Prince of Wales. That's very much up to his father to decide when that happens. He automatically becomes the Duke of Cornwall, which gives him the Cornwall estates, the large estates that belong to the Duchy of Cornwall, which are now his, automatically by right through a 13th century Act of Parliament. And then after that, it's expected that Prince Charles is going to slim down the royal family in that the royal status will be kept, but the amount of jobs and places and sinecures and so on will be redistributed. That happens automatically, really, at the death of the monarch. Anyhow, and Prince Charles has got some pretty radical plans for that, it's said.
Well, this family lives under a budget, does it not? And is some of that going to drive the direction that the new king takes it?
Well, and a lot depends on what's going to happen to the budget, because you have to have a fairly large budget with a fairly large family of people working in it. However, if we've already, of course, lost Prince Harry and the Duchess of Sussex to California, which in itself led to a redistribution of roles and jobs and honours, and so we're going to have another one now as Prince Charles works out who he wants to represent the royal family and frankly who he doesn't.
All right, let me turn to Daisy now. Daisy, what have you learned? What do we know about the first few days now of the official mourning?
Well, these operations, as they're known, are put in place not just months or years in advance, or decades in advance. But of course, the best laid plans can be changed at the last minute. So whatever I'm about to say to you, Lester, may well change. The royal family could, of course, change their minds. But we know that the Queen's body will be taken to Holyrood, which is the official residence in Scotland, where she is at the moment. We know that books of condolence will be opened all over the country. We know that her coffin will be then transported on the royal train from Scotland down to London. Now, traditionally, when that's happened in the past, the train tracks, at the side of the train tracks, have been surrounded by people throwing flowers. And you'll remember probably the way that Diana's car journey had people lining the streets throwing flowers. So we may well see that with the train. In fact, I'm told that the plan is that there would be a second train behind the royal train to pick up all the flowers and clear the lines. Then she will get to London. Of course, the other thing, tomorrow, King Charles will officially be proclaimed as king. Now, he is king now. There isn't an interregnum at the moment, but he will have this procession tomorrow, this performance tomorrow. Well, that will happen with the Privy Council. We would expect to hear a speech from King Charles as well. And then her body will lie in state at Westminster Hall within the Palace of Westminster. That's the oldest bit of the Palace of Westminster. Now, in the past, when that's happened, 4 senior members of the family almost stand guard at the 4 corners of the coffin. It's considered a very, very intimate part of the mourning process. And the thoughts are that would be the Queen's 4 children. So that would be Edward, Andrew, Anne, and Charles. Now, obviously, we haven't had official confirmation that that's the case, but that's what many people are expecting. And then, of course, the build-up to the actual state funeral, which will be a huge event.
Daisy, thank you for that. And we take that note of caution that it may change as we progress here. Let's bring in NBC News royal contributor Susanna Lipscomb. Susanna, if we could talk about Prince William for a moment and, his perhaps growing responsibilities, growing footprint now in a world without the Queen. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I suppose he comes into the limelight even more, as you say, because he's now the heir apparent. He's moved up the ranks. And so now that we have a king Charles III, who has come to the throne in his 70s, the prospect of William's own reign comes closer. Of course, there's a chance that King Charles, it's going to take a while to adjust to saying that, will live as long as his mother, not reign obviously, but live as long as his mother. But of course, he's taking over in his 70s, a big job. And so we may well see in the next decade or two, William becoming king in his turn. And so I think what we'll see in the coming years is a real focus of growing William into that role, that he will step up and that we will see him far more representing the country, even more than he has done. I think they will come absolutely into the limelight. And we saw that starting, of course, at the Platinum Jubilee. We saw the focus on that line of succession, the Queen standing next to Charles and William and to William's children, and so that you had a sense that we could see the 3 generations of the royal family ahead. The royal family were very deliberate in the choice of who we saw at the Platinum Jubilee to make this point. But we're only going to see that more and more over the coming months and years, so that we start to build a trust in William as a future king as well.
I wonder if there'll be signals, if we'll get hints or clues as we watch the family progress publicly now through what's to come over the next few weeks.
Yes, because it's all a sort of reordering, isn't it, really? I mean, we now have, everybody has a different position in line to the throne, and we all know this from our own personal family tragedies. When grandmothers die, the next generation comes up to the fore. But here it has constitutional effect. And so I suspect over the coming days, we will see the clear signalling of the royal family to indicate to us the future. And we'll see where people get lined up in importance. Whether Charles's siblings continue to have such a visible role is a question we need to answer. And of course, we already know whether the Duke and Duchess of Sussex will have. They won't so much. So the focus is very much going to be on that line of succession.
All right, Susanna, thank you for your analysis. Let me bring back Keir Simmons, our correspondent outside Buckingham Palace. And Keir, we've been watching the images where you are, also various other places where people are leaving now their flowers and making their statements of honorarium. What are you seeing where you are?
Well, Lester, what we're seeing are people flooding into the streets here at Buckingham Palace. There aren't residential addresses here, not close, so people will have made the effort to come here even in the rain. And that means that the hundreds, perhaps thousands, but certainly hundreds of people who are outside, it's hard to see because it's dark, outside Buckingham Palace, they've made a special effort in difficult weather because, of course, they want to pay their respects. What we will see in the days ahead, Lester, are similar scenes. There are different plans for the death of the Queen, depending on where she died, and because she has died in Scotland, she will first be moved in Scotland, and then in time her body will be brought by train back here to London. She will then lie in state here in London, and I suspect if you cast your mind back, for example, to the death of the Queen Mother, who also lay in state, what you saw there were lines, we call them here queues, of course, lines of people waiting for hours to simply walk past and pay homage to her. Well, this is Queen Elizabeth. I think you can expect to see that and some, frankly. If these crowds here are any indication of the way that people feel, and I suspect they are, then I think you'll see that in the days ahead, because there will be days of mourning before their state funeral, before dignitaries from around the world come to pay their respects. Ordinary folks are going to get to pay their respects, and I suspect what you'll see too is people, ordinary, me and you, ordinary people, just folks on the street, coming here from around the world simply to be able to spend that moment with a Queen who has devoted so much of her life. And then I think what you're going to see is a split screen, actually. You're going to see that public mourning and the public pomp and ceremony taking place, because it is a funeral, but it equally will have all of those aspects that surround the British sovereign. I think you'll see that, and this split screen at the same time you'll see the private mourning of the royal family. And we have learned that Prince Harry now has arrived at Balmoral. So there are so many things happening behind closed doors, Leicester, that we can only imagine, but that we can picture. And William and Harry together at Balmoral, the place where the Queen consoled them after the death of their mother, together again there for the death of their grandmother. these are private family moments, but anyone who has experienced the death of a loved one, an elderly loved one, will know how the dynamics of a family shift and how families come together and are united. And we hope, don't we, that that's what's happening right now for the royal family.
Yeah, Keir, a couple of things have struck me. One of them is the simple statement in which the news was delivered. A couple of lines, the letter, affixed to the gates where you are there at Windsor, at Balmoral, for something of such magnitude, such a simple declaration.
Yeah, that's the way they do things at Buckingham Palace. Few words, but powerful words. This is history. This is history happening, and so I think for the royal family, it's a private moment, but there is also all of the public side which they are going to be part of. And for Prince Charles, as you've been mentioning, now King Charles, he is having to shoulder the burden of that responsibility at the same time as mourning the death of his mother.
Keir Simmons, thank you. Let me bring back Wilfred Frost for some closing thoughts as we near the end of our coverage here. This news first breaking, as you recall, around lunchtime, your time, with word that the Queen's health had taken a turn, the doctors being concerned, and then that very brief message we saw a bit later on announcing her death. Is it hard to know the journey this country now is embarking on?
I think it is, Lester, and look, this is an incredibly, profoundly sad day for the nation. There's no two ways about that. But as we've been listening to these tributes, I do pause and reflect and wonder that as much as we've all suspended our rational thought in recent years and hoped that Her Majesty would live forever, this day was inevitably going to come at some point, and I wonder whether it has come at the least bad possible time. She got us through the pandemic. She was able to enjoy her Jubilee celebration and witness the joy that she brought so many people and the gratitude that they had for her. And then right till the end, she was able to get probably the sense of self-worth that she would get from knowing that she delivered on her duty once again by appointing a new Prime Minister. And now she goes off to heaven to be with her husband, her strength and stay. And it's a terribly, profoundly sad day. But in that regard, there are some positive, and she will be remembered with enormous gratitude by a nation. And may she rest in peace.
Wilfred, well said. Thank you. With the passing of Queen Elizabeth II, a 70-year chapter of history comes to a close, and a new chapter has now begun with the reign of King Charles III. There will be 10 days now of ceremony signifying the end of one era and the beginning of another. We'll cover all of it for you in the days ahead. That concludes our coverage. We'll have much more tonight on NBC Nightly News. For all of us here at NBC News, I'm Lester Holt in New York. Good day.